Hey guys, Taki and a cat with some updates to the Blink Mirror Arrow character. Now, I have to say that off the bat, this build is still working. We're now in Cruel, nothing that fancy, but this build just keeps on giving, and this might be my new favourite character ever. Now, we've made a few changes to it, and the big thing that... Okay, so let's backtrack. Let's go. So, originally, we saw this dude's forum thread when you guys started freaking out about how cool it would be to play a Blink Mirror Arrow build. I did research. This was the best build that I could find, and I used this to base a lot of my core ideas around. Now, the main thing that he did was he did the whole Eldritch Battery mind over matter thing, right? Blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. Now, I didn't like how he did certain parts of his tree, and I also didn't like how some of his I didn't like some of his setups, and I felt like he was wasting some of the potential. So what I did is I immediately did the gut reaction, and a lot of people do this, right? Is they see a build that they really like, and they go, "Ooh, I didn't like one or two things," and then they cut too much. So this was his core tree, and if we bring up the PoE planner, and we look at my base, okay, bring this over, you can see that for my base, I cut the whole Eldritch Battery thing because I didn't like it. Because I thought, this whole Eldritch Battery might have matter thing, I can see why you're doing it, but I didn't like how much he invested into Shadow Start to not get that much out of it. I felt like he was over-investing, so I cut that. And you'll see that on my tree, I instead invested those points into minion damage, so on and so forth, and came out with a much lower point on the build. Now, I've been playing around with this whole Pierce Chain idea. If you've seen the last video, if you haven't, go back and watch that now, please. And I mess around with Chain, but I just prefer Pierce. The Chain, you lose too much damage, whereas with the Pierce, you just get that really juicy DPS. You need to swap out gems for a single target. It just feels good. So then it was a case of, well, I really just want to use a Drill Neck. If I'm running Pierce, I want to run Drill Neck. So how can I get over to this point of the tree? Because again, projectile weakness, well, it gives you 100% Pierce. It doesn't give you 100% increased damage with the Drill Neck. You only get the 60%, 50 from the Pierce Gem, then 10% from an uncorrupted Drill Neck. So it just felt bad that I was missing out on damage. And I was really unsure about what I want to use for my quiver. Did I want to use Rearguard for some block chance? Or did I want to use just a good rare with elemental damage? And again, Mirror and Blink Arrow, they only scale off of your weapon and your quiver. They ignore everything else in your gear. So if your ring has amazing LE damage, weapon elemental damage, they ignore that. The only things they scale off is minion damage, and then they use your weapon, they use your bow. Okay. So I was also, while leveling, struggling a little bit with mana sustain. And I was just about making it work with Elrion Jewelry, but then as I started replacing my Elrion pieces just for like rares to get my resist up as I entered into Cruel, I thought, hang on, I'm going to have to really think about how I'm going to solve this mana problem now. Otherwise, I'm going to be too far into the character, so I'm going to have to respec back into Eldritch Battery, mind over matter. So I was thinking about, okay, well, what can I do? How can I make this work? And then I went back to the core guide. I played around with EB a bit, and I'll show you in action. Eldritch Battery does work really well for this kind of a character. If you just look, because there are some base cooldowns into the skill, there is always time for stuff to regen back up. And I'll also just run up to the next waypoint so you can sort of see the build in action and get an idea of just kind of how it works. So you just sort of get some mirrors out, get Flesh Offering, and then you kind of just go crazy. And you'll see that there's never any mana issue. Now, this isn't anywhere near this build's full potential. It's missing a lot. This build will be making use out of EE, so on and so forth. Get more power out of the summons, and yeah, but right off the bat, you can see it does pretty good single target damage. It cleans up breaches surprisingly well, and it's just a very smooth leveling experience for a summoner. Now, the one thing that I really dislike off the bat about using the Eldritch Battery thing is you miss out on health regen. That feels terrible. Not having health regen, I really dislike in a build which cannot leech, so that's just something that I'm going to have to come to terms with and supplement that with just having a very good HP pool and so on and so forth. Very easy to do once I put Mind Over Matter into the build. Right now, Mind Over Matter isn't in the build. I'm just doing Eldritch Battery and nothing else because I haven't quite got enough energy shield on my gear to make use of, you know, Mom. So we did some big tree works. I'll get to the waypoint, then I'll show you those. And after the tree works, I'm very happy. And once I get 100% pierce, which I'll have, without having to use projectile weakness, it means I can then use more defensive curses. Having more defensive curses help layer the defense of this build. This build will have roughly 200-ish% HP. It will have Mind Over Matter with about 1 to 2k mana, so that will get added onto the HP. And we will have, ideally, Tri-Curse with Elemental Weakness, Temp Chains, and Feeble. So with all of that in mind, what does my new tree look like? It looks like this. Will you sell for 40C? Oof. Me at 45 and you got a deal. Come on, Robert Downey Jr. Pop jump. Setting my Voidwalkers off. They're really nice. Like with the Leech enchant, 45C is a steal. It's getting a good deal there. Come on. Hog. Right. So back to the skull tree. So this is the new tree. Now the things that I like about this tree, things I dislike about this tree, there's still a few things I want to tweak about this tree, but as a core base, if you refer back to this guy's tree, he does a lot of kind of travel. He gets the sound life cluster but doesn't fill it in. He gets all this flower stuff but doesn't get this flower stuff. He doesn't get any minion damage on the tree, and he cuts all the minion damage on the tree to get over to Shadow, but then he doesn't really make good use of Shadow. There's not much point traveling this way. It makes sense why you want these hybrid clusters, because the second you add Eldritch Rally, Mind Over Matter, these hybrid clusters become amazing because it scales both your life and your energy shield, which is also your life. So it becomes very, very efficient. However, coming down this way suddenly feels bad. This feels bad. This feels awkward. This doesn't feel that great. Again, elemental damage on the tree does not scale our minions. The only things that scales our minions damage off the tree is minion damage and skill effect duration. So I was like, well, what can I do? So back into my tree. We cut this section here, and these points we've used to reinvest to get this full life wheel. This is a better net gain than getting this. We cut all of this rubbish here to then spend the points coming down this way. So here you spend 3 points traveling to get to 20% life, but here you spend 4 points traveling to get to 20% life, but then get access to Pierce. You have access to another 2-point jewel. One other thing that I like about this is, since I'm playing around Tri-Curse, the way I would achieve Tri-Curse is have a pair of gloves, which would be corrupted with either any weakness or temp chains on hit. That way I can have Split Arrow with Curse on hit, and then Enfeeble on whichever curse I'm missing. Another thing which I like about having the Pierce this way is this build doesn't get any increased AoE, and with the previous setup we didn't have any inbuilt Pierce ourselves. The only Pierce we had was coming off the Prod Weakness. So when it came to cursing would be very awkward. Because we don't have much AoE, using Rain of Arrows to curse would be tiddly. It wouldn't really do much. It's like teeny weeny little curse. That doesn't feel good. And in breaches you need to kind of curse everything. Then using Split Arrow without any inherent pierce feels bad, because it would just hit like 4 mobs and be like brilliant. So you'd have to hit once to hit 4 mobs, and then that would apply Prod Weakness, so you then have a chance to maybe pierce those. This way you can use Split Arrow. You still don't have 100% pierce on your Split Arrow, so it's not perfect, but you would have 60% pierce coming from the pierce damage, the pierce chance here, and the 10% pierce on the drill neck. And 60% pierce is much better than nothing. You can make 60% pierce work for you, and most of the time the only things you need to pierce are scary things. So rares, you don't need to, be cursing white mobs. So you have the usual gameplay of doing jump, jump, and then in the downtime, fire off 1 split. It covers most of the screen. Jump, jump, fire off 1 split. Jump, jump, fire off 1 split. Another thing that I've done sort of make this build more of my own and make better use of the Ascendancy options was I wanted a way to incorporate zombies into the build because of Fleshbinder. You and your minions have 1% additional physical damage. Now you can see in his one he was just using the extra 1 point to get the minion damage here because he didn't really know how to incorporate zombies into the build in a meaningful manner. And again, I'm not bashing this dude's build. This build is the core of mine. It's just I'm looking at his and seeing what I can do different. That's the thing that whenever it comes to Path of Exile, it's much easier to see the flaws in someone else's build than it is in yourself, because it's like if you have anything in life, if you're stuck on something, you ask someone for help, they see things you don't. So anyway, my point being, Daradar, you're still a bro. You'll probably never watch this, but anyway. So what we get to do now is pick up Fleshbinder, which gives you and your minions 1% additional physical damage for each zombie you own, and pick up this one node here, giving our minions 1.5% life regen. Now, another thing you can do is, if we look at the links on my helm, is we can have Raised Zombie, Stone Golem, because again, we don't ever want our Stone Golem to die, because Stone Golem is what gives us the nice regen, right? And this is life and mana, so we can't have this dude dying. We don't want him to accidentally die in the heat of combat and we don't notice, because if that happens, we will die. So you can link him with Minion and Totem Elemental Resist, which gives him a bunch of resist. Also gives him a bit of elemental damage, which is good because he gets super auras from our generosity, and Minion Life. And then you go, okay, well, we've got a floating socket. Well, if we just throw zombies in there, then we suddenly have these really tanky zombies who, from this one node here, will have natural regen, so we're not going to have to constantly summon them. And we have access to loads of minion life, loads of minion damage. We have access to loads of minion life, minion damage. And suddenly having to travel through minion life to get to the good damage nodes, like here, for example. Having to get this one minion life node feels bad, because we don't need it on our blinks. But to get the nice juicy damage behind it suddenly feels good, because this minion life is making our zombies more effective at just being meat shields. And it's giving us mitigation. So ideally, I would like to cut enough points. It could just be from the form of cutting jewels to pick up this cluster completely, just to get maybe another zombie here. That'd be another 1% mitigation. Pick up these 15% damage nodes flying around. I would also like to get Hexmaster, and I would also like to get Skittering Runes. If you're running Tricurse and you're touching both curse wheels, it's stupid not to get them, really. So what I might do is pick up both of these curse wheels. This 20% aura effectiveness feels really good, because that's a big part of our damage, but I don't think that is as efficient as getting this aura stuff. So ideally we'd pick that and that up. We have enough life that we could afford to cut 2-point jewels, but cutting 2-point jewels feels terrible. These flask nodes are the best nodes in the tree, so cutting these feels pretty terrible. We can't cut duration. Maybe cutting this bottom wheel, but duration is just so important that I don't think we could justify it. If we could get away with cutting this bottom wheel, that would suddenly give us so much flexibility into the tree, because it would then let us fill in all of these jewels, which feels really good, man. And it then gives us points to fill in stuff like minion damage. But as a core base concept, this is kind of what we're rocking with. This is what I'm going to build around. This is what I'll play with. And we'll just have to see where the build takes me from there. I'll keep you guys updated as I keep progressing this character. I'm Tarky, the cat's peaced out. Have a good day. Bye-bye.